Conservative groups say their freedoms are being violated by proposed legislation that aims to end the use of conversion therapy. That's a decades-old practice that attempts to change a patient's gender or sexual orientation through counseling. Lawmakers behind a new bill say it's potentially harmful to a patient's mental health. Conservatives say lawmakers are misrepresenting what conversion therapy offers.
Going after speech of churches, of religious organizations, counselors, and others, and telling them you can't even discuss this idea of sexual orientation, gender identity, unless it's the view we want you to discuss. You can't question it, you can't explore whether there's other options, or even from the perspective of religious individuals, telling them you can't talk about the moral issues implicated with sexual orientation and gender identity unless it's the government's approval on it.
If approved, the legislation would declare conversion therapy fraudulent under the Consumer Legal Remedies Act.
In America, you would never think that the Bible could be banned, but that's in fact what could happen in California if AB 2943 passes. This bill would prevent so-called conversion therapy, sometimes referred to as sexual orientation change efforts, and add it to the list of fraudulent schemes under the state's Consumer Legal Remedies Act. AB 2943 declares advertising offering to engage in or engaging in sexual orientation change efforts with an individual is fraudulent business practices. If approved, victims of sexual abuse could no longer get counsel if they develop, as often happens, unwanted urges to engage in same-sex behavior or become gender confused. This bill would also make it unlawful for any person to sell books, including the Bible, counseling services, or anything else that directs people to trust in Jesus Christ to help them overcome unwanted same-sex attractions or gender confusion.
As a former prosecutor with the Attorney General's Consumer Rights Section, and as a prosecutor of the Consumer Legal Remedies Act in particular, I want to make it absolutely clear that the First Amendment does not prohibit banning fraudulent conduct. The faith community, like anyone else, needs to evolve with the times. The science is clear. When you look at the support list, it includes the California Medical Association, the California Psychological Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics. So the claim that the First Amendment can be used as a defense for promoting fraudulent conduct is a fallacious argument.
Study after study has shown that conversion therapy is ineffective and damaging. Science and facts show that being LGBTQ is not a disease, a disorder, or an illness. Our LGBTQ Californians should not be subjected to fraudulent practices which could pose critical health risks, and with that, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Members, I rise in support of AB 2943. This bill simply says that fraudulent activities, no one should be able to profit from them. Conversion therapy is a fraudulent activity that has no scientific basis. I am thinking about young people and also speaking in support of this measure. Many times our young people are misled by things that they hear that they think might be true or might be accurate. And this year I introduced a bill that would help us support LGBT students to help them not be impacted by bullying or impacted by things that might cause harm to them. I think it is important for us to declare that this is a fraudulent activity and that there are penalties for anyone who would profit off of it. And I urge your aye vote for AB 2943.
We have to think about the legitimate experience of people who have gone through conversion therapy and have said that this was a good thing for them. The other thing I think we have to consider is potentially the implication for the faith community. And I think maybe this bears a little bit of explanation. Is Christians do believe in spiritual transformation. Christians believe that we are all sinners. We all equally fall short of the glory of God. But because of what Christ did on the cross, we've been given a new heart, and we've been given a spirit that transforms us. And so Christians believe that across the board, and they practice that in their faith. Not everybody practices that faith. Nobody's saying that anybody is going to be forced to practice that faith. But they legitimately practice that faith, and there are books, there are conferences, there are areas where there could be a transaction involved, but are legitimate practices of a faith. And so, look, as Christians practicing, we are in a struggle against sin, and we believe that is our personally held belief, that God can change us. God, I hope He can change us. I hope He can change us.
Assembly member, I'm going to ask you to please keep your comment to the merits of the bill.
Okay. I'm a work in progress myself. And so let me just say that, I think we should think about the implications, that these could be much broader and go into, the language of the bill. I'd like to work on certainly tightening that to make sure it doesn't infringe upon legitimate practices of our faith.
What your bill does and commercialization, particularly with respect to books and tapes and other things that are produced by religious entities who have a point of view that this kind of therapy is legitimate, that they counsel in their churches, they provide commercial transactions, but that's oftentimes within the setting of a non-commercial organization, meaning a book or a tape or the offer of that kind of therapy in the walls of the church would have some kind of a price tag to it to defray costs or to otherwise Could you please address that directly with respect to moving this point of view and this therapy into a class of speech and commentary that is prohibited from being commercially utilized? That question to the author.
I'm going to ask him to address that in his close. Thank you.
This orange, if I tell you that this orange will help you grow a foot taller by tomorrow if you eat it, and I give this to you, that is legal. You know that it will not help you grow an additional foot. Now, if I told you that this orange would make you grow an additional foot, and I give this to you, and I ask you to pay me 50 cents, that is what this bill does. Makes this a fraudulent practice. So as we think about this bill before us here today, I hope that you will too demonstrate the courage of your convictions and understanding what this bill does, and demonstrate that members of the LGBT community should be cherished, should be celebrated, and most importantly, we should be loved. I ask for aye vote.
Thank you. With that, Madam Clerk, please open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Madam Clerk, please close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 50, noes 14. The measure passes.